Like, it's not an awful figure, you know. Well. Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here. Welcome to my review for the Power Rangers Lightning Collection Mighty Morphin Pink Cell Shaded Edition. Spoiler alert, possibly the most unnecessary figure in the line so far. I'll go over all the basics and then I will do a comparison of all the other numerous MMPR Pink variants we've released, and there'll be kind of a little mini rant at the end. Really feel the release of this figure was unnecessary, at least at this point. But let's start at the beginning like usual, where we go over the accessories. Alternate hands, the one she has on her now are for effectively gripping the bow. This one just has a closed fist and then a karate chop hand. And you can see they have like a paint on them, which is also supposed to lean into the cell shaded aspect. It kind of looks like, honestly, she just accidentally walked against a fence. Like a fence that was being painted. She then actually has all three versions of the Blade Blaster, which I guess is exciting. You know, you have the blaster mode, the holstered mode, and then the dagger mode, so that's at least something. She has a special version of the bow and arrow, which is just effectively translucent. Well, the bow is translucent, the arrow is solid pink, but I guess it's supposed to sort of lean into the whole theme. It kind of looks more like something that would come with a translucent version of the figure. Then you have the standard effect part. Well, this is the one that comes with pretty much every Pink Ranger that comes with the bow and arrow. And I do like this effect part, and I think this one is one of the cooler looking ones, but it's pretty much the same stuff. And it does not include any sort of alternate or human head, which I think is disappointing for a particular reason I'll get into in a minute. But looking at it, you can see it's got all kinds of random paint everywhere, and I guess the style of this is effectively meant to be like a cel-shaded look, like if it was a cel-shaded drawing and it's supposed to capture it in a specific moment. I understand what they're going for. I'm sure there's somebody out there that really likes that idea or the concept or whatever, but I'm going to be honest, for me, it doesn't work. I think it honestly makes it look just messy. It can look kind of cool from certain angles, maybe, but for me, for the most part, any angle I have it in when I'm looking at it, it just looks like they spilled a bunch of paint on it. Like, that's what it looks like. I mean, on the helmet, you have this little piece right here, which just looks like dripping, crying paint. You have some little accents here, which kind of work. You have this on the back. This review is sponsored by Bosley and Keeps. And then, like, you have some black paint here on the mouthpiece, which looks like they definitely spilled paint or she's starting to vomit up oil. It just doesn't look right. You don't really have a whole lot going on in the chest area. I mean, like, paint-wise. But then you get down to the bottom half and you have some sort of style pieces here. This one looks okay. I think this looks more normal, quote-unquote, like what they're going for. Again, it kind of depends on the angle, how natural it looks, but I think this looks better than up here where it seems just kind of random, especially, at least this is just my opinion. You know, maybe there's someone out there that really likes it, but I just feel, for me, it doesn't work. You have some blue paint pieces here you can see on the gloves that are supposed to be the reflective area. You can see there on the back of the hand. You got some on the back as well. And, like, that's what they're going for, is the idea of a cel-shaded still image angle. And it doesn't work for me. And I think there was a version of this figure that could have worked for me, but it just doesn't, and that'll come in the rant. Other than that, it's basically the same as the original mold. In fact, I'll get into the comparisons here in a second, but it's using the original pink helmet mold. There is a revised version that was used for the April release and the Cat release, but this is using the original one. The same general mold is the same. No loose joint problems. It's got your standard articulation and all that. I do have a little bit of a warped hinge joint here, which can make it difficult for her to stand sometimes. Like, it's just ever so slightly off, so you have to get it standing just right. But other than that, you have your little hinge joint here, ball joint, elbow joint here, swiveling at the fist, ball joint here at the leg, knee joint here. You are going to be a little bit hindered, as always, from the skirt, but it's fairly flexible. Then you have, like I said, the hinge joint here on the feet. Mine's just a little bit clicky. You do have the hinge joint at the waist, ball joint at the chest, ball joint at the head. So your standard articulation. And fortunately, it feels like of good quality. It doesn't feel overly loose. You know, it's nicely posable. No real problems there. Let's go ahead and take a look at some comparisons. Just real quick for the sake of it. Just in case anyone's trying to decide between a Lightning and a Legacy, this is the old Legacy ones from Bandai. This isn't really comparable because you're probably not going to be looking at the cel-shaded one as your main one, but I figured since I already had it out. But now let's take a look at the literal team of Rangers we have here for this. And so now you can see just how many MMPR Pink variants we've released in a fairly short amount of time. Who would have thought she would be the one to get the most variants so far? So obviously, we have our cel-shaded one right here. This is the original release. This is the metallic release. This is the TMNT April release, where the only difference outside of the accessories is she doesn't have a skirt. And then this here is the cat release. You can see, because I have all three of these guys next to each other, that they all have the original helmet mold, which is a little bit more slender. It kind of beaks in a little bit here. And this one here and this one here uses the new updated, more well-rounded, more accurate helmet, which is kind of disappointing in general. So like on top of this, in my opinion, being an unnecessary figure, it sucks you're using the older helmet. To be perfectly honest, I don't think the old helmet was that bad, but it would be nice to get the updated one. Just for a little bit of a close-up, you can see what the difference is there. You see what I mean about it being a little bit more angular on the original one, and this one's more well-rounded. But these three in the middle use the old one, and the other two use the new one. Something that I will give it props for, even though you have obviously this random paint here for the cel-shaded look, is the pink itself is actually more consistent than most of the releases. I think April is the most consistent release. Metallic actually doesn't have any problems, but these two suffer from like some patchy different colors between the arms and the chest, and it creates this really kind of unprofessional looking look, and it's kind of funny since this one has a bunch of patchwork on it, but it is consistent in terms of the color pink on it. But it's just insane how many different versions of MMPR Pink we've had, and honestly, all of them aren't even that different. I mean, I guess Ranger Slayer would be in this too, but it's not really worth the comparison. Now here comes my little bit of rant about this figure. It's not like an awful figure, you know, it doesn't feel of an awful quality, it's well articulated, the joints are nice, you know, there's not really too many huge differences of it from your standard Legacy release, or yeah, Lightning release, there we go, I haven't done that in a while. But it's just so unnecessary. And in my opinion, setting aside my points about why it's unnecessary at first, I just don't think the cel-shaded look works for me. Maybe it's for some people, but for me, it ultimately looks just kind of ugly and messy, and it's just, setting aside any complaints about its existence, I just don't think it works. I don't think it looks good just looking at it on its own. But just talking about thoughts on it being unnecessary is, a lot of people complain that the Lightning Collection will milk MMPR because they have a lot of MMPR releases. And that's definitely true, but in my opinion, even though they lean towards MMPR, they're a little bit balanced, and they do release unique things. But with this is definitely a milking release, doing a cel-shaded version of a figure we already have 4 different versions of. This is something that I wouldn't put past them, but I can't believe they released it so early. This is something I could see them releasing after years, and they've exhausted every possible MMPR option, and I feel it's just too soon for a really, truly milking release like that. Not to mention there was better options for this. With the cel-shaded look, it leans nicely into the idea of a comic book figure, and I've really wanted MMPR figures that are done in the style of the comics that have a bit of a cartoon comic booky feel alongside with the comic book heads, and I think that would have been a perfect opportunity to give me something kind of new and unique while also being able to milk MMPR rather than this weird middle of the ground release. I feel like Hasbro in general has had this weird aversion to releasing comic book or cartoony heads, which I'm not sure why, because it's not as if it's outside their wheelhouse. I mean, right here, as you can see, the differences are pretty minor. I mean, Doctor Strange and Kim look the same. No, but I mean, this right here is an example. This is a figure released by Hasbro in the Marvel Legends line, which is from the What If animated show. And instead of making it look like live-action Stephen Strange, they made it look like the style of the cartoon. So I don't know why they can't do it for these type of figures. I think that would have been perfect. Putting that option aside, I think there was also still some other MMPR Pink options aside to celebrate this Pink Ranger Day. You could have done a Pink Ranger Century. There is still the MMPR black version of the costume to release, which is kind of a cool variant of the suit that has black accents that I think looks really neat. And I think that would have been a cool one to appeal to the hardcore fans of like, oh, this is a cool niche release from the comics, and also something that casuals might be like, oh hey, cool, an MMPR Pink suit, that's neat. I hate to go on a rant like that, but that's part of the review for me, as I feel this figure is just so unnecessary. Again, it's not the type of figure I'd put past them, but it's just too soon, and I think there was better options, and it just highlighted to me more that I'm frustrated that we can't get comic book looking figures like this, but instead we get this half measure. Remember what Mike said, no half measures. Overall, guys, I can't recommend this figure. The only people I can recommend this figure to are diehard MMPR Pink enthusiasts or Cat enthusiasts or Kim enthusiasts that are already going to pick up every variant for their collection, in which case you're going to be picking this up anyway. But I just think this is a unnecessary release. I think there was better options. I don't think that we should have released this soon. And even setting aside all my opinions on why it's been released, it's not a good looking figure for me. I don't think the cel-shaded thing works. It honestly just looks a mess. So I cannot recommend this one. But that's about it for this one though, guys. Until next time, don't forget, like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you can get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.